So here we have the order of play with approximate timings. As I mentioned to those who were seeing it earlier, the first off is Raj with this what sounds like a fascinating subject of Tamil script, Postage Due Markings. Um, I mean, I happened to find some of those in the Book of Tea. This is a wonderful work, but otherwise, I think it's a pretty well new subject, and we've got quite a few other things to go through. So all I can do at this stage, unless you have any queries, is to stop sharing my screen and then pass it over to Raj.
Thank, thank you, Bob. I sent you a share request.
Yep, which I have accepted.
Okay. So hi everyone, good to meet all of you for first time in this group gathering. I've been collecting for over 40 years. My first exhibit was 40 years ago, almost 40 years ago, 1977, back when I was in high school in India. I've been living in the US for 40 years. Primarily collect postal history, primarily exhibit them in a thematic framework. And this particular subject is pretty narrow. I thought it would be interesting to get feedback from fellow postage due collectors. So this is about mail by one Indian expat community. They're called Chettiars. I'll talk a little bit about their history. But they is it mail from them that triggered the bilingual postage due marks from from the three locations in Perak, Malaya, on inbound mail, essentially through 2023, in 1923. And I would love to share this with you and get some of your feedback. And as Bob mentioned, so a lot of these images are shown in Leahy's book, and also a couple of them that are not in Leahy's book are there in Proud's Postal History of Malaya, particularly the one on the top left from Telok Anson, and the one in the bottom right from Kedah, so from Ipoh, Perak, sorry. So the philatelic context, you've probably all seen this because you look at here's some samples from Joe Robertson's collection of inbound Malay mail. About 90% of postage due covers that Joe Robertson shows in his collection are from this community. And how do you recognize it? In some cases, like this cover in the middle here, it says Chetty. They go by Chetty or Shetty or Chettiar, but very few of these letters have their addresses written in English. Almost all of them are written in Tamil, which happens to be my mother tongue that I can read, write, and speak. So it became kind of interesting to me to start collecting this material about 3 decades ago. Here are examples all the way from 1891 through 1898 of some of the letters in Joe Robertson's collection. But I'm sure all of you have who collect postal history, if you don't have these in your collection, you at least have run into these practically everywhere. And I will focus on a specific aspect of these letters. But before going there, a historic context here, I collect a couple of different areas of postal history related to the global Indian diaspora. Uh, Primarily started off with indentured labor working in plantations from Mauritius and Reunion to the Caribbean and the Guyanas and down to Fiji. These are very uncommon because most of them were illiterates, and they when they wrote those letters, they either ended up in dead letter offices, or many of them had postage due because they didn't know enough to address them properly or to frank them properly. And then there is East African postal history from Indian railroad workers who came to work on the Mombasa to Kampala railroad, which is a little later around the turn of the century. And I also collect letters written specifically by Indian soldiers who served in overseas campaigns, mostly during the British times, British colonial times in Southeast Asia and Africa, but subsequently, of course, World War One and World War Two in Europe and North Africa and Middle East and elsewhere. And this particular piece of it is the merchant class, the merchant expats, particularly they refer to as Tamils because that's the language that they spoke, and they came from the region of southern India. And I'll get into a little bit more detail about them. Here's the spatial context. This southeastern part of India is where they are from. Today, the state is a linguistic state called Tamil Nadu, or the land of the Tamils, and within that, there is this one region close to the land linked to Ceylon, or the what used to be the historic land link to Ceylon. That's about where their communities originated from, their historic villages. But they have a very interesting history that. Around the turn of the 18th century, in 1792, there was a huge famine, and uh, the they used to be trading in salt. Basically, they took salt from the sea salt from the shores to the interior of India, and that was their core business at that time. And after that famine, the British took control of a monopolistic control of all sea salt production in India, which was banned until, of course, those of you who are familiar, in 1930, Gandhi did the big salt march, and that's when salt Indians could start harvesting sea salt again. But the Chettiars were an interesting community in that while most of the economy was based on salt, they kind of took the attitude of if you can't beat them, join them. And they started supplying the British primarily through Calcutta for a lot of the military campaigns in Southeast Asia. And that's how they ended up going to Southeast Asia. So here's a brief history of how they ended up. They ended up in Calcutta in 1806, and then they followed some of the early campaigns to the Strait settlements, to Malacca. And when the Sri Lanka Ceylon transferred from the Portuguese to the British, they moved there not to finance tea and coffee estates, which were financed by the colonial bankers, but to finance locals for their trades in the community. And then they moved to Penang in Strait settlements in 1820, Singapore in 1825. In Burma, between the first Anglo-Burmese War and the third Anglo-Burmese War. And then they moved into the interior of Malaya in the 1850s, the interior of Burma in the 1860s, and even went through the French settlements in India in Pondicherry all the way to Saigon, and from there to Phnom Penh, and also to Laos. And the last of their migrations from India was to Medan, Sumatra, to work basically to support local workers who were working for the Delhi Company. So not Bencoolen or by any of the British settlements in Sumatra, but the Dutch settlement of Medan. And if you look at it, they were, in today's terms, we would refer to them as venture capitalists. Back then, of course, if they were Europeans, they were referred to as bankers and financiers. If they were Asian, they were referred to as money lenders. But if you look at their money, less than 1% of their investment in 1930 was in India, in their home country, in their native villages. Two-thirds of it was in Burma, and the rest of it in Malaya and Ceylon and Indochina. So I have about 1,000 letters I've collected in that particular piece of the collection, spanning over 100 years. In India, there are over 130 origins and destinations, most of them from the Chettinad region that I mentioned down here, but also other parts of India, and all the ports of entry for this region, the five ports of entry. And then, of course, they were involved, as I mentioned, in Burma, and they primarily financed local indigenous people for rice and timber harvesting. And these are I have over 70 origins and destinations. The ones that are missing are these three provinces that I've identified. In Malaya, I have quite a significant number of origins and destinations, and there they finance rubber, tin, and opium production, opium trade, not production, sorry, because the opium was grown in India but then smuggled into China through Malaya and the Strait settlements. And here are four missing provinces that I don't have letters from. And in Ceylon, a lot fewer, just about a dozen locations. Again, not in the Tamil region of northern Ceylon, but mostly in the other areas where they financed native Sinhalese in their farming operations. And in Southeast Asia, in the French Indochina, they were mostly around the Saigon region, but also Phnom Penh. And from there, they went into Phuket, Thailand, and Medan, Indonesia. I mentioned that. There's some mail to Mauritius, very uncommon, and a rare letter that I have actually from the turn of the century from Paris. So this is the overall geography of the material we are talking about. Very quickly, I'll show you some of the traditional postal history material, not the bilingual stuff. It is the start similar to Joe Robertson, my collection. The oldest postage due letters from 1891, and these were just the blue pencil markings of the postage due. And then it went on to postage due markings from India with the rectangular postage due annas and the circle T and the Penang denomination of 16 cents due. And sometimes it would be the inverted triangle marking from Penang of the T and the actual amount displayed in color pencil. And here's one from a postage due marking from Indochina with some of the earliest postage due stamps themselves. Again, these are all letters from this community to each other, to their family members. I have over 2 dozen very interesting small post office horseshoe postage due markings from India, again from this community. And here's an interesting one that's actually from Burma to Saigon with postage due with the French Indochina postage due stamp. But I will jump through this quick. I also mention that besides these blue pencil markings, of course, there's the 20 centimes marking with the red ink from the post office and a straight settlement postage due stamp. And I believe I also have some with postage due stamps from the Federated Malay States and postage due stamp from the Malayan Postal Union. This one with actually a manuscript ink marking and not a hand stamp of the T. So that's the primary material, and some of it is interesting multiples postage due markings from India and Malayan Postal Union stamp. Many of these letters are unpaid. Some of these are underpaid. And it's interesting that about 25% of the 1,000 letters I have written by Chettiar families to each other are postage due, which appears to be quite an unusually high number. And if you look at Joe Robertson's collection, about 90% of his 1921 to 26 FMS inbound letters are written by Chettiars or to Chettiars, and about 90% of his 1924 to 1936 are also from the Chettiar community. So here, let me jump to the bilingual markings. So these are primarily 1913 to 1922. That's what is listed in Proud. And the three towns, all in Perak. They're in English and Tamil. And what they are is basically, it says, for example, here's this one that says 4 cents, and underneath in Tamil it says kasu. Kasu, interestingly, is not cents. The word Tamil word for cents is sadam, but kasu actually means loose change. It's a colloquial Tamil word that basically refers to generic coins. So it's interesting that they chose that word, but I don't know who chose it. That's a part of what I'm trying to get down to is who authorized this bilingual postage due mark. And here's one. This is a postage due mark from Taiping. And this is a letter that originated in Rangoon to Taiping. And here's another one that originated in India with the horseshoe marking, postage due markings of India. And this is a 8 cents unpaid postage due, again, bilingual. And this is also Taiping. And here's a transit marking through Taiping with the postage due, double strikes, the rectangular marking, again, bilingual, underpaid letter. And here's one with another transit marking of an unpaid letter, but it's sorry, not transit, but this one is the Ipoh Perak destination marking of the postage due. So there are several, I believe 50 of the 134 covers in the Joe Robertson collection at the PDMSG website are these bilingual markings. That's quite a number, quite significant. And many of them, this 2 cent marking actually is from Telok Anson. So besides the Taiping and Ipoh, Telok Anson was the third city location in Perak that this bilingual marking was in. And the rates vary, everything from 2 cents, 4 cents, 8 cents, and then 10 cents, 11 cents, 12 cents, and 16 cents. And those are the different varieties. Telok Anson only has a 2 cent variety, and Taiping happens to have the most in terms of varieties. So that is a quick walk through this, right? And my big thing is, what are the questions? How unusual is this high fraction of postage due mail? I don't know. It's not a very legitimate, statistically relevant census, but 25% of the over 1,000 covers I have in my collection from Chettiars are postage due, and 95% of those are inbound to Malaya from India or from Burma, in some cases from Ceylon, in some cases from the Strait settlements to Malaya. Uh, and 90% of Robertson's postage due collection is also from Chettiars. So I guess my big questions are, is there a specific reason for high Malaya inbound use? I mean, there is rate changes, there is not having awareness of weights, but then was there a lot more rate changes in Malaya that resulted in postage dues? Or one of the theories I've heard from people, and I don't know if it's a stereotype or if it's real, that they were actually gaming the system. They wanted their mail. This was all business communications between family members, and they wanted the mail to be securely delivered, and they were not sure that if they applied the stamp it would be delivered, so they sent it postage due so they could be sure it would be delivered. The question is, was the postage due that much cheaper than sending it registered to get delivery secured? And for that matter, was the delivery really that insecure that they had to have their family members pay this extra postage of postage due to secure its delivery? And the other question I have is, was the high incidence of Tamil postage to mail the reason why these bilingual markings? I have not found any publication or record, any post office record that says why these bilingual markings were created and why particularly in Perak. While this mail postage due appears to have gone to many provinces in Malaya. It's Perak was the only one that has identified bilingual markings, and how the decision was made, where can I find the documentation on that? And I guess the big question is, do these bilingual markings extend beyond Perak? Is it just that Joe Robertson and I haven't run into this, and others haven't run into this? I haven't seen any exhibits or publications that show anything outside of these three cities in Perak. And then the last big question is, are there other examples of bilingual postage due markings in former colonies, European colonies, whether it is English plus native script or French plus native script or Dutch plus native script? That's a other big question, and I will stop there with my last. I have my email here. Will be glad to hear from anyone else. This is a. I actually visited Chettinad for the first time last year. I was always curious about this community that these people came from, that they spread all over Southeast Asia, and they were such prolific writers of letters back and forth. And I stayed in this beautiful bed and breakfast. They actually made so much money and wealth. They subsequently, most of them had to flee after these countries became free, because they were essentially treated as a brown Indian extension of colonialism, and so they were quite ill-favored politically, and there were a lot of laws passed, whether it is in Burma or in Malaya, and they all fled back to India with mostly nothing except the clothing on their backs, because they suffered huge financial losses with the monetary conversion from pound sterling to Japanese yen. Most of their venture capitalism was financed by borrowing money from British and French banks and then lending them at a slightly higher rate to the locals. So I will stop there and go back to my questions, and would love to hear feedback from any of you.
It's Candice Nelson here. I'm presuming that the Tamil was not an officially authorized language in Perak or wherever these bilingual hand stamps were used.
That is what I'm curious about, because I mean, post-colonial, Tamil is one of the official languages, for example, of Ceylon. And I believe in Malaya it's not anymore. In Malaysia it's not an official language. And I don't know why it would have been an official language just in Perak, because they were in all the Tamils were in all provinces in Malaysia. And besides Chettiars, there's a huge number of Tamils who went to work in the plantations as indentured labor in the rubber plantations in Malaya from South India.
Roger, answering your question about gaming the system, if correct me if I'm wrong, but under UPU regulations, there was no obligation for the originating postal administration to
Hmm.
forward unfranked unfranked items to the destination. They could be held or they could be sent back. However, this was between one British colonial country to another. So it may well be that whoever were the administrators, they recognised the need for communication between the two. So that sort of deals with one possible blocker on the sending of unfranked mail between the people in Malaya and India. And secondly, rather as you say about gaming system, I'm aware from my own area of my own specialities in Switzerland, and
Hmm.
I have a large proportion of express, i.e., special delivery mail um, incoming that was underfranked by a very small amount, 5 centimes, 10 centimes, whatever it might have been. And I've read, and I support the view that this was deliberate, in that it was intentional that just by underfranked by a small amount, that the mail had to be hand delivered rather than just left in the post box or collected
Hmm.
somewhere. And so, for a very small amount on the to be paid by the addressee, they ensured door to door or face to face delivery, which gave it greater security as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. If you look at the actual the way these letters are addressed, most of them are addressed as "Please deliver to so and so at a shop in this town."
Mm.
So, and clearly,
Yeah.
because they were posted due, I guess they were delivered at a shop.
Mm.
Other examples of such bilingual postage due marks? I have not seen any from Malaya with Mandarin or with Malay. Tamil's the only language I've seen, and I have not seen it from other countries either. But the fact that I haven't seen it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So figured I
Um,
would ask the experts.
Remind me after this meeting, Roger, do you have a copy of Ed Leahy's book, The Thief Attacks?
I just ordered it after you sent me that email.
Have you found a copy?
I found a copy, yeah.
Gosh, well done. Because it was published in very small numbers,
Yeah.
I've been trying to contact because Edley he died before it was published, and the publishing rights are held by his family, and I've tried to contact them in the United States without success, so that we could possibly scan it and
Hmm.
put it on our website. But to find hard copies of it is well done. One member of the group very kindly scanned the whole book for me, and it's a substantial book. Have you? So anyway, going back to your question, Raj, scanned through or looked through the book to see if there
No,
are
I
other?
haven't received it yet. I'm
Oh, I
waiting.
see. Okay, fine. I'll leave. I won't spoil your fun. I'll I'll leave it for you to have a look through.
Sounds good.
Any more questions arising from this display? All I'm going to say is that it's absolutely fantastic. My great love of postal history is because it's the post in context, and what a context this is. Something I've never heard of before. We've mostly heard of the Tamil population and its movements, not always in the best of lights.
Hmm.
But but you know it is what it is, and what a history it is, combined with the British colonial rule there, and the development of that part of the world, and of course the post has always played such an important role in it. So I've been
Yes.
absolutely fascinated by it, and I for one certainly will be. I mean, you delivered it at lightning speed, Raj.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I for one will
Just
be
a
looking at the recording of it.
a comment for one of
Okay,
the
can I ask a question? Did the Tamil community have quite a large interest in working in the post office?
Oh, there were definitely a lot of the Tamil people working in the post office because a lot of these letters, you can see the translation. It was interesting. More often than not, the only thing that got translated from Tamil to English was the name of the city that the addressee lived in. So it would be Singapore or Kuala Lumpur or like that, just the name of the city. And clearly there were Tamils working at the post office on the receiving end of those cities who knew exactly who to deliver the letter to because the
Yeah.
rest of the letter was entirely written in Tamil.
Yeah, the reason I asked the question was that you mentioned that those types of markings don't appear to. I rather gathered from you that that those types of markings don't appear in English and other languages, just in English and Tamil,
Just in English and Tamil, that's right.
which made me think that possibly the Tamil community working in the post office had made certain that Tamil was included in those markings, and they were instrumental in actually producing those markings. Getting the designs done while they were working in the post office.
Yeah, but it's what's interesting though, what's very unusual is it was only in Perak, and they were
Mm,
they and not the other Malay provinces that the same Tamil community was in all over, and all the letters,
mm,
whether they were written to Burma, whether they were written to Malacca, Singapore, Saigon, they were all addressed in Tamil. So, which means
yeah.
that there were Tamils working in post offices in all these countries and in all the provinces in Malaya. But Perak was the only one, and only three of these towns in
Mm,
Perak. Like you saw the list. I have over 70
mm,
towns in Malaya that their letters written to these in Tamil, and
yes,
but only three of them have Tamil postage due markings.
yeah. Over what period were those markings used? Were they used over a very long period?
10 years, 1913 to 1922.
Oh, right. Yes, 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 yeah.
And the letters themselves, I have letters that span 1869 to
Mm,
1970 from all these countries to India or back or between the countries. And the postage due letters I have are from 1891 to 1956.
mm, mm, mm. Mm.
You were asking about the postal union regulations for whether or not the sending office was required to forward underpaid mail. And I believe I've got the 1939 UPU treaty here, but I think it was so in the other ones that the sending office was obliged to forward unpaid and underpaid mail that was letters or postcards, but was not obliged to forward underpaid or unpaid mail of other classes like printed papers and so on.
Okay.
That's also my understanding. Just letters and simple postcards.
Yes.
Good. Thank you for that, Ken. Any more questions on this display before we move on?
Well, I think it's very interesting to see how a language like Tamil, which would be foreign to most of the people in Malaya and so on, should get into postmarks. I think I can't think of any other cases where languages other than the official languages of the country involved
Yeah.
get postmarks.
Yeah. I know. It is very intriguing. I someday, hopefully, I'll be able to dive into the official documents that actually say how these came into existence. Because there were quite a few postmarks. It wasn't just one or two, right? It wasn't one or two to say, oh, someone just handmade them. It was from 3 locations, and there are over a dozen of these marks, varying in denomination.
Of course, the next thing, Raj, is to get this in print and have something published in our journal.
Yeah.
Thank you in advance. You don't get away with things lightly in this group. Wonderful. I really enjoyed that. That was superb.